And hello, welcome to Save the Kids demonstration for the National Week of Action Against School Push Out. We're going to start off with a video and then we'll be moving on to our panelists. Gotta play the video.
And as punishment, you don't have to go to school. Shouldn't that be a reward? I mean, who doesn't want to sit around watching Netflix all day? But suspensions have some unintended consequences. Turns out, students who get suspended perform worse than government have a discrimination problem when it comes to discipline. Black students get disciplined more harshly and more often than their white classmates for the same kind of misbehavior. You heard that right. A black kid could push another student or cuss at their teacher and get suspended, while a white kid could do the exact same thing and remain in school. Obviously, that's not cool. So over the last few years, more than half of US states have passed laws to reduce suspensions. Now that's all well and good, but what happens if some real dangerous stuff goes down, like someone brings a weapon to school? That's why some people think suspensions are a necessary tool. It may not be great for the suspended student, but they say it's more important to keep everyone else at the school safe. So, should suspensions be suspended? No. And with good reason. Students who get suspended are more likely to repeat a grade, drop out of school, and become involved in the criminal justice system, aka the school to prison pipeline. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, the concept is pretty simple. Students who get suspended are more likely to drop out. And students who drop out are 3 times more likely to get arrested. More people in the US prison system. And as we mentioned at the top of this video, suspensions aren't handed out equally or fairly. Students with disabilities are suspended at nearly twice the rate of students without disabilities. Black look. Some people say that if you act up, you need to face the consequences. But a lot of behavior that results in school discipline exists in a gray area where our own subconscious stereotypes can influence our decision making. Sure, there's the stuff that's clearly suspendable, like bringing a gun to school. But sometimes it's because of what researchers call challenging behavior, like talking back to a teacher. And in those situations, research shows that students of color can get disciplined while their white classmates don't. Again, not a good look. So what are schools supposed to do? How do you balance school safety with the bad effects suspensions has on the individual students? One option is to replace out-of-school suspensions with in-school suspensions. Instead of getting sent home, a suspended student comes to school but is separated from other students. In theory, the benefit of this approach is that they can continue to learn at school where they're typically provided with a quiet, safe space to do their schoolwork, and their days are structured, and they may even get counseling. But critics say in-school suspensions are nothing more than a holding tank for disruptive students. In fact, some research shows that holding students in isolation may be just as harmful as sending them home. And in-school suspensions require additional staff, which some schools can't afford. Another option is restorative justice, where instead of punishment, the focus is on rehabilitation. If a fight breaks out between two students, instead of separating them and suspending them both, restorative justice focuses. They're encouraged to accept responsibility for the harm they caused, while also reflecting on why they acted out. The hope is that the whole process will eventually create a safer, healthier school environment. It reminds me of being in middle school. We had something called Peace Patrol. And when you were on Peace Patrol, you got a blue jacket and a clipboard, and you got to patrol the recess yard when kids were out there playing. I mean, I guess it worked. Nobody got suspended on my watch, so who knows? Research from a Colorado suspension rates did indeed drop. However, Black students still receive disproportionately more suspensions than white students. It's not clear exactly why that is, but restorative justice is difficult to get right. It's also expensive, requiring special training. training for staff. A third option is to keep it local. With this approach, each school decides what works best for its students. Out-of-school suspensions might be included, or they might not. Every school is unique, and the benefit of this approach is that it allows staff and teachers more flexibility to pass a bill in 2018 outlawing suspensions in middle schools. The governor vetoed it, saying the state shouldn't be too heavily involved in how local schools discipline students, because it's the teachers and principals who are in the classrooms every day, so they should be making the decisions. But a primary drawback of the local approach is what we talked about earlier. More out-of-school suspensions could feed the school to prison pipeline and disproportionately target certain minority students and kids with disabilities. And schools that suspend students aren't necessarily any safer than those that don't hand out suspensions. One study based on a survey of students in over 700 middle and high schools in New York City found that in general, schools with a high...
Oh, what did I do? All right. So what we're gonna do, okay, welcome back. That was a short video. I seem to be having problems with it. So we remove it. So welcome again to our panel. We're going to be talking about support, not suspension. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panel. We had Christian on, and we seem to have lost her. What we'll start off with, in the video, he talked about restorative justice. And please let me know if you guys can hear me and if you can be heard. We talked about, he talked about restorative justice. However, at Save the Kids, we focus more towards transformative justice. And transformative justice is bring that to you if y'all just give me one moment. Just want to bring up some things. So I need to play my little my music again so I can undo that. And but and then we're gonna go into our first, let me see if Christian is back. I'm gonna get her back on the line. And I'm sorry, y'all, things are moving kind of slow for me. But we have Christian back in, so hopefully we'll get her in. She couldn't hear. But okay, so we're going to get started. And first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Queen Daphne, and I am the Midwest coordinator for Save the Kids. Can you guys hear me? Can everybody say something?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yay. Take it up. Just want to make sure it's good. So we're going to start off. And when we speak of transformative justice, it's something very powerful. So we really have a professional here with us today regarding transformative justice. Lucas, Lucas Allen DJ. I can't pronounce your last name, Lucas, but you're all right with me. But Lucas, he's with the Transformative Justice Journal, which produces some great periodicals surrounding transformative justice and issues. He's also an adjunct professor of prison education, a member of Save the Kids, who gets down and often doing many panels, events around Saving the Kids, No Youth in Prison. And he's also a PhD student of visual arts, of philosophy, and he knows a lot of stuff. And he's published articles on poetic inquiry, criminology, and transformative justice. His books include Word Out, Commies and Zombies. I have to read that, Lucas. I didn't know you had that. Elba Memoirs of an Ex-Capitalist, and Capsida. And I hope I pronounced that right. And I want to welcome you, Lucas. We've been like comrades on Save the Kids for quite a while now. So I'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming on too. And we do want to start off opening up in regards to transformative justice. So can you, again, reintroduce yourself and give us a little info on transformative justice?
Yeah, thanks so much, Daphne. This is great to be on. So, yeah, so I'm professor, adjunct professor, prison education program, and so my my main focus and everything with that is transformative justice. It's also like dispelling notions of like the similarities between, like in the movie they talked about restorative justice, and a lot of people use them similar, and they're not at all similar. Restorative justice is kind of almost like, it sounds great. It's like you have, the person that did whatever, criminal, deviant, what have you, around with people, the victim or perpetrator or whatever, talking and figuring it out and trying to restore a time, the before time and everything, which isn't the case. Like if you lost an arm in a car accident, you can't grow that back. So what happens is you're something else. So transformative justice, number one, looks at social economic conditions and everything, via like late capitalism we have now. Looks at class, race, sexual identity, gender, just everything. And also is like the focus of like a new person and everything. And so, I mean, there's always like conflict on how this can be achieved within like the fines of a capitalist country, but it's also like moving forward. It's like the whole system has to transform for this. That's the big picture and everything. So like the movie kind of talked about. I mean, I'm sure everyone else will talk about how. And a transform a student, you need to either kick them out, have them at home, have them isolated, solitary confinement, which the movie beautifully showed and everything, or like continually other them. And this is totally like the anthem of transformative justice. I don't know if you want me to go further or if there's any other questions or anything. So
No, well, yeah, you could have expounded further, but thank you for that definition. And I
yeah.
want to so we and that's the thing, we have to transform the society, period. Again, and as Lucas stated, we can't rewind. It has to be a that meaning that we have to go ahead and create another society that works well, because what we have, it's not working. So transform these conditions. And so I'll and start with you, Lucas, on the question at hand: support, not suspension. And I know for a while you have been an advocate of many things involving the youth and school and things like that. So if you can expound with us on your position in regards to support, not suspension, and what side of the table do you sit? Even though I know, but they don't know. Everybody else does know. But and your can you expound to us your opinion on that, your feelings about that?
Yeah, so I am very much against and I'm horde of anything that kind of has the prison hyphen industrial carceral whatever many complexes into schools, even though a lot of people bring cops and barbed wire and tasers and all that crap and everything into the schools, how it permeates into the schools, how just the thinking, mindset of everything, of trying to other and like continue to stigmatize, I think is a very harmful, just devious. I mean, they talk about, they talk about like different cults or whatever out there, like, brainwashing kids. I don't think there's any, death cult more preposterous as, capitalism and its schools and everything, and places that are, full of mostly poor kids, kids of color, just totally making them, obviously, Marx talks about the army of surplus labor and everything, and, the inner city schools and all these schools that aren't, totally created as a way of continuing, bourgeois, soldiers and everything. You see it all the time regarding just anything that they want to take money of the schools, or they vilify teachers. And no, like the reason, and everyone has a hard time, like either they know it and they have just a hard way of disciplining. So it's money. Like there's obviously a disconnect between private schools or charter schools the answer. I know in like Wisconsin and Minnesota, it's like the charter schools. Like, well, we're not a charter school, so like no, it's not. It's instead of saying it's the rich and the poor, you're making up this other thing. So I'm very much against any form of cops in schools or barbed wire or anything, especially now like with the suspension and everything. It's me growing up, like I never was suspended, but like just the idea of like having a kid go home, it's just like, well, they're not. I mean, it's just such an odd way of doing it in like rural Wisconsin and everything, and Milwaukee or Minneapolis, anything. But it's also just a way of like, well, they're not here. Like they have to be taught, and the schools have to be organized in such a communal kind of community way and everything. Like it takes a village and everything. So yeah.
And it's strange because I'm gonna tell you something about me, and like from the child's perspective. But to know me is to know me, and then it'll make sense that when I was in school, I like knew just how easy it was to get suspended. So I literally either I got suspended every 11th day or every other Monday, whichever came first. That's literally, and then they created in school suspension, and it sounds weird, but of course, y'all know I'm just different. To me, was like a godsend that I'd rather spend all day just in one room on a whole different schedule than with others. But as I got older and thought about it, it was like literally in a dungeon because it was in the high school, and like you're like down in the dungeon and wanted to be there. So that was my position then, and I totally agree with you on that. Now, like the position now that we're finding, just that they like for the child, some like I get to go home for a few days. Yeah, I played that card as many times as I could, of getting well till they caught on to me and I started getting whoopings. But then that was over. But we're gonna thank you, Luke, because I want to kind of get everybody introduced to get on here. We're going to go to Miss Christian Fudge. And Christian, and I'm gonna let Christian introduce herself and where she is. And so fortunate that Dignity in Schools campaign this year, hashtag Eyes on Mississippi. So it is wonderful to have Chrissy on. She's Chrissy to me, on as an educated administrator out of the state of Mississippi, and a very special young lady who, like, I've known since she's probably a baby, like literally, and now she is a wonderful adult who has contributed so much to her country, to education. And Chrissy would have the opportunity to have experienced working in the different school districts, from the poverty-stricken communities to the more affluent neighborhoods. And so welcome, Chrissy. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of those disparities and things.
Okay, so again, my name is Kristen. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. So if you've seen the news, you've definitely heard about Jackson, Mississippi. So I've taught in Jackson Public Schools, which is in the capital city, and most of those schools are settled in underprivileged neighborhoods. So if you think of an underprivileged neighborhood, those kids don't always have the best resources. They don't have the best guidance, whatever. So for a lot of those kids, working with them for the past 4 years, I've seen some of them who come to school just to get in trouble, and they know that if they get in trouble, they're gonna get some attention from somewhere. So, and now I work in Madison County, which is a totally different ball game. I went from Jackson Public Schools, which is predominantly Black, to now I work in Madison County, and the school I work at is predominantly white. So it's like I've seen both sides of the fence. Like I've seen the underprivileged, and now I work in the school where, if you just by looking at the school building itself, you can tell there's more funding and more resources, and the kids it's a different grade of kids. But as far as the support, not support suspension, I definitely don't. I'm totally against suspension, and here's why. If you think about it, like I said, a lot of kids, when they come to school and show out, they didn't get that from school. it came from where they came from. In most cases, as I've seen, they came from home. So sending them back to the dysfunction won't actually help them. It's like adding more dysfunction to dysfunction. So it's like I feel like as an educator and people in leadership, like we have to find a way to rechannel that besides sending them back to what contributed to what they did to get suspended in the first place. Now, kids, you can't blame it strictly on the parents or the environment because kids, they have their own minds. But the root of it all is they've seen it somewhere. Because you can't tell me a kindergartner came to school knowing how to use scissors to stab something. No, they've seen or watched something somewhere before they got there, and now it's embedded in them. So it's like we have to find an alternate method to suspension. So I'm definitely so I'm against it. That's, that's that.
And when in the difference, like in working in a different the school district, so from there in Madison County and then out of Jackson and seeing those disparities. The video I played earlier, and he was making that point that the black children are more likely to get suspended even for the same act as the white children. So is that like something you see, like formerly working in Jackson, maybe a child just hit another child, or got into a fight and lead to the suspension? Do you see a disparity like in that? And then in
Yes,
Madison
but I
County, if
wouldn't.
children were to commit the same?
The difference is I wouldn't necessarily. There's a difference, but I wouldn't
Oh, I'm sorry,
put
you
the
in there.
difference. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can now. Yeah.
Okay, so like there's
Yeah.
a difference, but I wouldn't necessarily charge the difference to a black and white thing. I would charge it more so to an environmental thing because, like I said, in Jackson Public Schools, a lot of the neighborhoods is filled with not just black kids, black, white, Hispanic. Like Jackson Public School has a large Hispanic population. I worked at a school and where we house those Hispanic kids that came from those different countries. So our school was a school they got sent to be educated. So like in South Jackson, you got a mixture of all races. So it's more so the environment versus the race. Because in Madison County schools, again, in Jackson Public Schools, they wear a uniform. In Madison County, they do not. So one could say, oh, you would think because they're in their own clothes that there'll be more bullying. No, it's like they're more comfortable because they feel more free because they're wearing what they chose to put on. They're not looking like everybody else because I got to get up and put on a t-shirt and shorts and go to school. So I say it's a more environmental thing versus black white thing. Just from what I've seen.
Okay. That's okay. And we're gonna thank you, Christian. We're gonna so we can bring everybody on in and get these perspectives. And I'm going to bring in Brother Shaw Ill, who and I know, brother, your time, and I appreciate you on the you out. And Brother CJ Shaw here, he is a resident of Chicago, a long-standing brother of mine, and also a former educator, former dean, interim dean for um, CC is at CCA schools, I'm sorry, in Chicago, and very active. But brother now serves as CICS, I'm sorry, schools in Washington Park, Basil and Avalon Park in Chicago, Dean of Elementary School students, and currently now is constituent for outreach coordinator for Illinois 6th district, as well as the 12th Illinois 27th district district office representative. Brother Shaw Ill in perspective, and I asked Brother Shaw Ill on the panel because his relationship and that building relationship with students and turning things around. So, brother, if you'd like to, what I want you to do is expound like on support and not suspension, like those the relationships you built with children and that we were able to see, and how you form those bonds with the children to create a more, I guess, a more stable environment for them, more safe environment where they're more comfortable and less likely to act out.
I appreciate you. Are you able to hear me first?
Uh, yeah, I can hear you now, and I'm sorry it's the delay.
All right, great. It's no problem. Again, I appreciate you for having me, and for everyone else on the panel for joining us as well. This is a very important topic and subject matter that I believe should be broadcast and magnified. So again, I appreciate you, Queen Daf, for creating this space and hosting such a conversation as needs to be had, especially during this National Week of Action Against School Pushout. This particular conversation in regard to school pushout, we're talking about support as opposed to suspension. And many people, more than likely, have never connected suspensions to pushouts, and even thought about the concept of pushing children out of school, pushing young people out of the educational environment, pushing young people, young humans, out of the publicly prepared and paid for space for their preparation, right? So again, I really appreciate you for this particular conversation, and those other members of the panel for joining us as well to make it a conversation. Um, as you mentioned before, I was just last year interim dean of elementary school students for CICS, Avalon, Basil, and Washington Park schools. Before that, I was program coordinator, community schools resource coordinator for Catholic Elementary School on the west side. The other three schools where I was dean were on the south side. Catholic Elementary School on the west side is where I was resource coordinator. And just prior to that, I was a truancy officer and mentor at Chatham Academy High School, which is an alternative high school here on the south side of Chicago. In between those roles, I also had the opportunity to coordinate programming at several Highland Park schools, which is a suburb in the far north side of Chicago, which, like our sister Kristen, provided the experience of a number of different educational systems, communities, and demographics. Um, and so, again, I don't want to stray too far from the direct question or subject matter that you referred to when you called me to the microphone, so to speak.
Do your
But
thing, brother.
I appreciate you, sis. But in regard to support as opposed to suspension, and the conversation around building relationships with the young people we are expected to support, the young people we are expected to educate. For me, that's something that I found very early on was a complete necessity. And I mean that, and I can't stress the word necessity enough. If you don't have a relationship with young people, you can't. There's not much that they will want to receive from you, right? And so we have to understand that in the process of educating, we have to create spaces and experiences that young people want to be in, that they want to engage in. We can't make education something that we're forcing down the throats or into the ears of young people. That just doesn't work, you know. But in the needing to build relationships and the benefit from establishing those relationships, I've come to find, that even the most challenging children, when they have a relationship with you or another staff member, those challenges are much more easy to deal with. Those challenges are much more easy to navigate and to find support for. When there's a relationship there, the challenges can be discussed in a much more open or elaborative way, oftentimes. When you have a relationship with young people, I find that they're more willing to express themselves with you. And it's through that expression that we as adults, as educators, should take our time to sift through what's being said and find how we can help those young people, how we can hear their particular cries. Because oftentimes, as our sister mentioned, it's environmental. Students come into school and may be carrying something from the night before, or from the morning before, or from the car ride over, or from the bus ride or walk over, or something that they may have seen or experienced that may have reminded them of something prior to. But if we don't have those relationships with them to, create that space to pull them to the side and say, hey, what's going on? Come talk to me. Before we say, oh, you that, correct your face or the way you're talking, things of that nature, but find out, what's wrong with the student, with the scholar, what is, triggering the scholar, before we simply look to get rid of the scholar because we don't understand the triggers. Another thing, really quickly, if I can, before I yield, just briefly, something that I've come to find, and I've expressed this a number of times in my engagement. Um, the process of education and the systems of education have not changed a whole lot since the early beginnings of public education in this country. And the systems of public education in this country were not created with all communities in mind. They especially weren't created with the fullness of potential development for our particular communities, especially. And so when we look at punishment systems or correction or diversion systems that are also grandfathered from times gone by, then we have to consider the impacts and the results of those systems. How they were designed to impact the scholar and what results were expected from them, and that leads to, as you all have mentioned, this school to prison pipeline that we have experienced. I myself am one who was, placed into that school to prison pipeline as well. I had scholarships to college before I left seventh grade based on my state tests. But when I went to a different school in a different community for eighth grade, around individuals who had zero competency around my culture, then came the suspensions. And I was expelled 5 times in the 5 years it took me to graduate high school, right? And then from that 5 times in the 5 years it took me to graduate, it wasn't a year and a half later until I was fighting a felony, you know. Again, while I was in college, 10 days away from a graduation from trade school, yeah, I was then on trial for a felony, and so I often wonder, had a mind like mine been nurtured and encouraged to, maintain within the scholastic environment that I preferred, um, where would my trajectory had gone? We see where I've, through the grace of God, have been able to make it today, but considering where I would have been able to go with proper support as opposed to suspension, I think would have been very interesting. And so that's some of the things that drive my passion to support the educational industry and also advocate for lower moderate income communities, marginalized communities within the educational field. And I appreciate you, sis.
Already. Already. And that was wonderful. I was great to hear, and that was great because experience is the best teacher, and that's another thing too. Have been a product of that school to prison pipeline, and that's very important because it's like in your connection with those children, give you an opportunity to take the from yourself and understand what they needed. And I'm sorry, y'all, but ever since me and this principal got into, police all just keep passing by my house. So okay, and I'm just watching them out the window slowly. But now we're gonna go. I want to bring in my sister and comrade Fundisha Anu, and Fundisha, who is, when I say a children that she has taught and cared for, and in so many ways, not only from state curriculum, but also holistic curriculum as well. And I can say so much in regards to Susan and just her love and passion for children and teaching children and developing curriculum and that nature. So welcome, comrade Freya Mall. Welcome to the panel. Just give us a little of yourself and and your and in as an educator in teaching your ways of dealing with children and how you support the children, in opposed to telling the parents, "Come get your kid. I don't want them here no more," and putting them out. And so, welcome,
Right.
sis.
Okay. Thank you. Greetings, everybody. Thanks for having me, Queen Daphne. My name's Fundisha. I'm a parent. I'm an educator. I've operated an independent private homeschool for several years now. Going on maybe 8 years now. I've educated my children as well as other children in the community. I was able to operate a daycare as well as run a after school program and assist in private school with assisting other students in their schooling. I've had parents come to me who were dealing with issues in the public schools and decided to, transfer their kids out of school. I assisted them with that transition, transferring out of public school, establishing your own private schools, as well as dealing with like the compulsory attendance laws and the truancy, the threats that parents were getting from not having their kids go to school if they, weren't really flourishing in school. So just trying to keep them interested in education and keep them involved. I like what the brother said, you can't force education on students, but trying to keep that spirit alive while they're young and tapping into it. And I think the public schools often they squash, they diminish that fire in them earlier on, and it becomes a traumatizing experience for them. So on the issue of suspension, we really don't have to deal with that as far as an issue when it comes to homeschooling, but we still have our own challenges that we face, and we face them head on with the students instead of just sending them off to somebody. I think in order to be an educator, you have to have compassion to educate. Educators do not run from challenges. They solve problems and they help their students understand knowledge so they can also solve the problems. Um, so John Henry Clark, he's one of the great African educators and historians that I've studied. And when it comes to education, he said the purpose of proper education is to prepare the student to be a responsible handler of power. Any other type of education is a waste of time. And I think that these institutions do not empower the youth. They often fear the youth, especially the ones who show power and self-determination. And when they don't understand them and they can't control them, they'll suspend them. The ones who do not follow the rules or who challenge authority figures are the ones most likely to get suspended, to get trapped, like the video was speaking on. They get trapped in the school to prison pipeline. They get criminal records early. They get the drive for education is diminished. The fire is put out for them early on. So why is suspension and expulsion the only option when school systems face challenges with their students? I think that school systems, they don't have something in place right now to support resolving problems and resolving challenges. But educators and administrators, they should be leading by example. They expect students to be able to resolve conflicts and handle difficult situations and challenges without causing more problems or having discipline. But that's not demonstrated in suspension. In suspension, it's like you're just getting rid of the child, pushing them out. You're not demonstrating conflict resolution. So the same expectation that we put on the youth, it should be demonstrated, within the system. And they should create support systems within the schools that address the needs of students. They have to listen to the students. They have to understand the students to even understand what the needs are, what the behavioral issues might be, what the issues of discipline might be. It comes from somewhere. So instead of suspending them, really facing the problem head on and addressing it so that it can be a resolution instead of just sending the children away, because that problem's still going to be there. So I think it goes back to like intentions. What are the real intentions? What is the purpose of suspension? And if we're honest, I don't think that there is an intention to resolve conflicts or to address the needs of the youth. So that's all that our current system, that we face currently in the current public school system, which is why I chose to become an independent educator and homeschool. and also promote that with other parents to show that they do have power to educate. But if we're able to create these on a small scale, we can also create these on a large scale. And the masses of our children and our youth are attending these public schools. And so they also need the same compassion and love and concern in the environment that they're sent to while they're going to those schools. And it's something that it can be created, but that intention has to be there. It has to be funded, and it has to be done with compassion and concern. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Yes, indeed. And when you speak of homeschooling, and I want to, because I will, but I'm going to confirm it with the who studies. So, Lucas, in regards to homeschooling and removing children from the public school system, and doing more homeschooling or a community-based schooling, such as with the village, it does that. Would that be a part of or the transformative justice process, homeschooling, when it comes to dealing with that?
I think a lot of students growing up and everything, I think they have a lot of like they're kind of they have their own, like, obviously their own specificality and everything. Like, it's hard of what can be done in this current situation and everything. Like, I think like a lot of homeschooling is like a reaction to like how horrible like public school is because it doesn't have so much funding and everything. I know like a lot of folks like that went to Montessori school, which is a whole different kind of organization. I think that like as a community, we really have to figure out what works, what doesn't work, because like it's like there's always these situations where kid is like just for whatever reason just I mean not fitting in or something. But as someone said earlier, like they bring in literally a backpack from home with all sorts of things happening, and most of the time has nothing to do with school. It's just like that's the place that all this stuff comes out, because you're dealing with all these 20 other strangers that are dealing with the same unedited atoms that you're dealing with. So it depends on every single like situation, and depends on like every community and everything. Like schools in their process and everything are relatively new, because you had like a local school like just down the street, or you had you had a smaller classroom and everything, or you had homeschool and like you just learn to read, or you just have that kind of that sense of curiosity, or you just want to read and everything like that. So I'll never tell anyone how to organize the school. I am against private schools and everything, just because they really from the get-go stop a lot of folks, people of color and poor folks and working class kids getting education and everything. So I'll always be diametrically opposed on that, on principle and everything. And I don't know if it'll take like creating just like freedom, because I know there are some like freedom schools that people organize on themselves and everything. I think that's definitely stuff. We just have to like, I mean, it's also hard with like schedule and everything to have like an awesome neighborhood of like, hey, we're just going to create a school, but then you got to get all these permits and all that crap. But why not? I mean, there's so many other possible anti-capitalist models out there and everything. So
Can I jump in there, Daphne, also, and add in for the if we look at the history of
Yes.
yeah, for if we look at the history
and
of
just because with this is no, I was saying this is an open discussion, so you guys feel free to open your mics and conversate on that. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, sis.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say when it comes to the history of like education, especially for Black people, we come from originally having one-room schoolhouses. During slavery, it was illegal for us to learn educate ourselves. We found creative ways under extreme oppression to continue educating ourselves and educating our people. So we were often had homeschools. We had one room homeschools, schoolhouses. We had schoolhouses in churches. We worked hard and purchased land, saving pennies to purchase bits of land just to open up schools in our community. So this isn't a new idea. This is something that we come from. We've developed our own educational institutions in our public school when the public school systems were segregated and would not allow Black children to go to school. So this public school system is new. It's not something that is a root from our history. Our history, you know, we come from creating our own. And so the idea of homeschool, it's not a reaction necessarily. I could see how it could be seen nowadays with that, especially with COVID and stuff. But it is something that is true to our roots. And it was highly effective for our people to learn when we weren't being educated by the public school systems. So it's a tried and true and tested idea. But right now, since they put in the compulsory attendance laws, those are, I believe that, and the Brown versus Board and the 14th Amendment, that's when school started becoming a mandatory thing for all to attend, based on age and based on geographic location and stuff. So, you know, just kind of looking at that shift, I think that our power of educating ourselves was taken away. And even with our students going to public school, we should still be able to have power to affect the change within those brick and mortar buildings, you know, with the public funding that we're paying, you know, through our tax dollars. So it's just a like disempowering of the people, and knowing our history and where we came from, we've always took education on our own. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, truly. And that was great. A question that I have, and this is for, well, Christian, because you're still currently that's in the school district. When it comes to like, so say students get into whatever and get suspended, do you see, and being in administration, of course, you guys have to be involved. Do you see like the any benefits of suspension? When I say that, like if a child gets suspended, when they come back, is there like what are more the chances of that same child getting suspended again? Like, does that discipline, does it help? Do they no longer act out during the school year, or is it somewhat like maybe a repeat for like, you know, like for a student? Like, do you think they learned from that, or do you see the same ones coming through the office?
Well, for some, when I was working in Jackson Public Schools, it was like a revolving door. Suspension does nothing for them. It's just kind of holds it in for a bit, but when they come back off suspension, it's the same. Now, for some, they're different, but most of them is like, I'm going home on vacation for a few days because, and I think a lot of it is there's a disconnect. The parents of today aren't the parents that we had growing up. Education is not a priority. I don't feel enough of a priority for parents of today because the kids don't care because the parents aren't putting emphasis on the importance of getting an education. So it's like parent teacher conference. Like when I was in Jackson Public Schools, we may have had out of 25 kids, maybe 4 to 6 parents showed up. Whereas where I've transitioned to Madison County, we had nearly the whole school come, and it was just meet the teacher. Like you were literally just coming to say, "Hey, this is my child's teacher," and go back home. Like it was like at Walmart. Like when the door opened, it was like a rush of parents. Whereas, like I said, in Jackson Public Schools, it was like you gotta sit there for 3 hours for nothing because it was like you got a parent here, maybe 1 2 hours later, and there's just not enough emphasis placed on the importance of education, I feel. So they don't take it serious either.
Okay, you made a great
So basically I feel
point.
like it starts from the
A great
house.
point. and that's a great point too. And you made that, which leads to a great question. And I start with Brother Shaw Ill on that. Like, do you think the parents' involvement and like Christy just pointed out that in this school district, in this disparity, in this poverty-stricken more community, that they have the conference and maybe 4 or 5 parents show up, in opposed to in another more affluent school district where the more parents are involved. And um, Charlie, I'll ask you first, and then even the rest of you. Do you feel that that makes a difference? That as far
I do,
as
and I
the
was just
child's
about to add
behavior.
that. Yes, because I was just about to add that it does make a difference because those babies, I worked with the younger ones. Like our school was pre-K 5, but I worked more so with the little ones, the kindergartners. And even as a 5-year old, seeing a 5-year old upset because we're having donuts with dads and my friend's dad showed up, but mine's not, it affects them because they like, well, why? Well, he always say he got to. It's the little moments that count, and I don't think enough parents realize that their presence makes a big difference. If a child knew that their parent was going to take them getting in trouble serious or taking failing grades serious, then they wouldn't get in trouble or have failing grades because they would feel like they matter. And you have enough of them, like kids of today, they are very vocal and verbal. So they talk a lot and they will tell you, like, well, mommy and daddy argued last night, so I couldn't get help with homework, so that's why I don't
Mhm.
have homework. Like they tell and talk even at 5 and 4 years old, because like I said, our school had pre-K. So even at that age, they are aware enough to know what's going on around them. But I don't think a lot of parents give our children enough credit. They think, oh, they're young, they're not paying attention. That's a fib. They are definitely paying attention, and they're definitely taking it with them and they're taking it to school, and we know all about it. So yeah.
Yes, indeed. And I like actually for everyone to maybe address that question. Do you feel that disparity that makes the difference? Brother Shaw Ill, during your time within the various school systems, did you see that as a disparity? Like the participation of the parents, did that matter?
Absolutely. There's a absolutely obvious disparity in regard to parent participation, and of course, parent participation plays a big role in the motivation and inspiration of their children. You for the most part, most children want to meet the approval of their parents, and so if the parent's not there to express their approval, then there's just less motivation there. You know. Um, Again, when we consider communities and social economic demographics and the availability of parents, you know, disproportionately, of course, we know that our communities, we have much higher rates of incarceration amongst men, especially. Many of these men are fathers, or at least are supposed to be fathers, and of course are not able to step into those roles, for various reasons that have led them into their incarceration. Many of our children are born to overwhelmed mothers who have left their children to their mothers, children being raised by grandparents in our community. That is an overwhelming, difference in our communities, children being raised by their grandparents or by their
Yeah.
aunts or a big sister or brother or the like. And then that additional parent or surrogate parent is also oftentimes working a bit extra to be able to afford this child. So again, when we look to, having things like parental engagement and when we schedule parental engagements, those things are also, culturally influenced and should be considered. When we plan things in the middle of the school day for all the parents to engage in, how many of those parents are able to take off work for that event so they can be there? It's not always that they don't want to be there, but oftentimes, due to the socioeconomic conditions in our community, they may not be able to be there. And then also, there's
Mhm.
the ways in
Great
which
point.
we show up. In our communities, we also have this underlying current of feeling the need to present ourselves in a particular way. And if we're not able to present ourselves in the way in which we feel we should, then oftentimes the anxiety caused by it will prohibit us from even showing up at all. You know? And so, again, all of these
Wonderful.
things, just from my perspective, are things that, are often cultural and socioeconomic determinants that must be considered by those of us who are typically in positions to make policy and regulation. The people who make policy and regulation are typically degree holders. The people who are in low and moderate income communities are typically not. So again, we have to consider, the rule makers and who the rules are being made for, you know. And so again, but the question, does parental participation have an impact? Oh, absolutely. And again, I believe there are other determining factors around the ability of our parents, some parents, to even participate at all. And I yield from there.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you made some wonderful points there, and which leads me into another question, and this is to Alfondisha and Lucas. That what type of, like, okay, support, not suspension. What would that support look like in opposed to, and I know actually each of you had touched on that previously, but specifically just here, what could that support look like, and would that be a combined effort from the parents and the school? What would that type of support look like in opposed, so if a kid gets in trouble, well, okay, no suspension. What type of support can be given to the child, um not specifically toward any act or whatever, but generally what type of support, and would that be would it have to be a collective effort between school officials and the parents? So
I
whoever wants
I
to go
think it
first.
would, yeah, like I know like a lot of kids would definitely have a like an inner suspicion of all things admin and everything, and especially with, with child protection and all and everything else. I definitely it's I wish there was like magic rainbow everything. It takes a lot of education on everyone's side. It would have to just unfortunately just kind of not happen spontaneously, but like someone said earlier, like if their parents are kind of divided and conflict and everything, and kid is coming home with all this baggage and everything, that's hard to do. I mean, like it's one thing of being like, just end suspension today, and just like I'm okay with that. Like end it today, and everything else will kind of come into practice and everything. But people want to plan and everything, so I honestly, I don't know. I just I don't want it to happen. So that's like, it's like, if you put out a call to end the war, just end it and don't think about it, because it needs to be ended, So it's a very transformative justice call just to end things. So I just say no to suspension. So
Basically. Okay, and Priyamal, Fondisha,
Frima, yeah,
in regard to the same question.
Yeah, I was just thinking too about the previous question. Also, I was gonna add in, as a parent, when I was opening up my school and my kids were still in public school, my presence, I made sure my presence was at the school constantly, and even seeing things going on at the schools, I was able to see like bullying going on in the bathrooms, or the way teachers were speaking to students. Even though my kids had someone there to defend them, I felt like I needed to be there to defend other kids too whose parents weren't there. And that's why I think it's important to have those support systems in place, because every child deserves that quality of education, that compassion. And not all children are going to have a parent that's going to be present. And so, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't still deserve the same quality education. You shouldn't be worried about how you're speaking to my kids because I'm gonna show up to school, but then talk to the next kid any kind of way or treat them any kind of way, or even turning a blind eye to what's going on with bullying in these schools. Just my presence at some public schools alone, I could see where the problems are, where the issues are. You have to be blind to not see what's going on, with some of these students and with the situation. So I think, like I said, going back to intentions, what's the intention? Because a lot of these issues can be dealt with when you're actually really trying to solve the problem. And I do think that we do need to have a collective effort with parents that are going to participate in the schools and really just looking out for the best interest. What I desire for my kids isn't going to be any different than what the next parent desires for their kids. We all pretty much want the same thing, for our children to be safe, to be educated, to be, to flourish and thrive in those settings. So the parent participation I think it's more of what are you looking at? What's the focus? What are we addressing? If individual students are having issues with whether it's at home or with society, that's where that transformative justice comes in. Because if kids are homeless or not having enough food or not having enough resources and money for clothes, and those are things that have to be dealt with. So the support system has to address those things, and it's usually general for all of us. I don't think it's going to deviate much. So I don't think that just because parents who don't participate, their children shouldn't be suffering, in school. School should be set up to where it's a structure where the children are all being treated, in the same and given the same things. The purpose of going to school is to be educated and to be cared for and protected. So I just don't see it as a big problem as far as finding the solutions. It's just, are the intentions there to find them? In the system, in this current capitalist system, in the capitalistic structure that they're in, no, that solution is not going to come, because you're going to look at social workers, you're going to look at police, pig presence on school. That's their way of solving these problems. So, and you see that they don't work, So yeah, it's really going to take us looking at something, creating something anew, and looking outside of the current structure, and building that, whether it's on campus, off campus, whatever that support might look like, feeding the people, housing people, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's up. And that man, that was a point. And truly, because that is a difficult, question to ask. Like, what would that support look like, and would that be a collective effort on the parents? And you guys, this was just wonderful, and which has just sparked my head and my brain, and like, we can be here for like 90 hours. And I think, like, do I want to do a series or whatever? Because it's like, actually, the point you guys made, it is an often talked about subject, but I don't really think that we have this proper conversations in the right spaces and places often enough, and to all demographics. And I think that's important. It makes a difference as well. And for that matter, before I go any further, is that this is actually something, and recreate this panel. I love to do it again outside this national week. And reason being is because just listening to the great points that all of you brought up, and it's just like so many dynamics involved, that it's like this is part of this struggle for self-determination, that we struggle for. But then the here and now, that what a lot of places really don't have, school systems don't have anything in place to address um, um, children outside of expulsions and suspensions. Alternative schools, Brother Shaw, you mentioned earlier, formerly working at an alternative school, and we know that in Chicago, the alternative schools is where they send, per se, the bad kids, and we're gonna. That's the one question that like to ask you, Brother Shaw Ill, and then once we're done there, I just like an indie perspective from each of you guys before we close out. But Brother Shaw Ill, at the alternative school, now this is a school that's, considered that these are all just like badass kids per se. This is what they label them. How when it's and for a moment, because I didn't engage with the students, but I was at CCI on Pulaski some years ago, but as a bookkeeper, so not in engagement, and I saw nothing different. So can you, Brother Shaw Ill, in regards to being there and like, so now you just have an entire school of children who have basically been kicked out of all the other public schools and had to attend an alternative school. Were those measures effective for children? Do you think it was effective for the kids, or was it just a place for the pot to boil over even more? Oh, y'all can see me scratching my arm. Sorry. Okay, Brother Shaw. Oh, he may have stepped away. But that is kind of a question that we want to, and I think that could actually be in the conversation in itself, alternative schools. And so, well, while we wait on Brother to get opinions on alternative schools, and what do you think about alternative schools for children who just can't seem to behave uh, with other children in other schools and are continuously needing to be disciplined and so on and so forth, or being disruptive to other students continuously. So, Christian, do you, if you there are who wants to answer, do you feel, what's your position on alternative schools, and do you think that's a solution?
I personally don't, because it's like if all of the kids with problems go to that one school, then it's not deleting the problem. It's just putting all the problem in one spot, which in some cases can create an even bigger problem. So it's like it's got to be something else, because after they only end up, in most cases they only allowed to be at the alternative schools for like a certain amount of time. Then it's like, well, what's next? Because still it's like
Mhm.
it's just an alternate school. It's not like they're doing anything. Well, from the alternative schools that I've seen, it's not like there's something different being set in stone. It's just they're getting taught just in a different location. That's what makes it an alternative school in in the cases that I've seen. So it's like, what's really, is it really serving a purpose?
Okay. And Brother Shaw Ill,
Yes.
same
The
question.
question that we're discussing alternative schools, correct? And if that is seen by us as a suitable solution for children who are seeing challenges in the regular school system?
Yes, and as well with yourself having worked in an alternative school, do you, from your perspective there, I mean, do you see that
Yeah.
as far as
So to be completely honest with you, I am not a proponent of the alternative school system at all. Not only have I worked in the alternative school system, but I'm also a product of the alternative school system. As I mentioned to you, in the 5 years, the 5 times I was expelled in the 5 years, they would always send me to alternative schools. That would be my option to get back into some form of education, is an alternative school. The last alternative school I went to was just because my attendance was pretty bad. Now, mind you, yeah, it was literally because the state would not let me graduate from a public school with this type of attendance. So I had to go to an alternative school where attendance did not matter. But mind you, I was, 18 years old, a fifth-year senior, and had not ever been through a full year of high school. So of course my attendance was going to be pretty bad. I didn't have an experience of ever attending properly. Um, and but again, I was a student who had scholarships to college before getting into high school. And so that scholastic ability was not nurtured, but instead I was sent into a place wherein that scholastic ability was almost had no place. I was blessed to have a homeroom teacher who would give me her freshman level college books like psychology and things of that nature, and I would do work. I would do those, work in those, program areas, because oftentimes for children who are intellectually gifted, they find themselves, we say, somewhat bored at the end of the day, and then they get into stuff, they get into things. But when we look at the alternative school uh, system, there's oftentimes, you need less credits, or you're expected to perform, at a very, very, very much lower level. You're not challenged at all. There are less after school activities, extracurricular activities, opportunities to engage social emotional learning, opportunities to engage in teamwork, things of that nature. Things like the band, sports, you know art and the like, different musical programs and so on. And it's to the point now where today in many alternative schools, they are magnifying those programs like music and what have you and art, but there's still not a dedication to scholastic excellence whatsoever. It's almost as if we don't expect these children to perform scholastically, and so we just want to find a way to get them a diploma, so as if that's going to help them in life. But if they can't read their contracts or calculate their paychecks, then what good does that do? you know and so again, no, I am not a fan or supporter at all of the alternative school system.
Oh wow. And so on point there. Okay, now Lucas, in your opinion, how do you feel about alternative schools, and do you see that as a good method for our seemingly somewhat sometimes very overactive unruly children?
I I definitely agree with everybody. Like when I think of alternative schools, like I kind of think of two things. The Black Panthers had some awesome like breakfast programs and everything that um organized folks and kind of give them an awesome political education, everything that is unreal, like anything we have today. There also was in like the 20s and 30s. There's a lot of like Communist Party, like young workers schools, either in New York or in rural, radicalized areas. I definitely support those models. I don't know what it would take to, maybe I'm just a dreamer, obviously, but I definitely like those models. But on the other hand, like like what folks have definitely said of alternative schools is definitely horrific. It's definitely just another part of the problem and everything. So I would totally like it would almost be going against what I just said. It would almost be like a non-charter school.
Mm.
And the problem is like just more money for public schools, support teachers. If teachers go on strike, don't cross the picket line, don't vilify teachers. Unless there's this huge like movement that always happens or is in its infancy and everything happening, and people are like, yeah, we need to make schools, awesomer. I would definitely be in support of that. So yeah.
Okay, and Felicia, in regards to well, you had practically, because you brought that and brought that idea to me in the question, but yourself, your position on alternative schools and the use of alternative schools.
Yeah, when I was thinking of alternative schools, I was thinking of like Shaw was speaking on the schools you get sent to when you get kicked out, when you get expelled from the
Yeah.
public schools. Okay, so just right on point with that. I think a lot of the students are bored. A lot of kids are geniuses, and they're not even given a chance to demonstrate that in public school because public school is not really challenging them. So a lot of times they get in trouble because they are bored. So when you look at like GATE schools, gifted and talented education, we had those in California, GATE with AP classes. Those are always looked at to challenge children, but I don't think children who are being challenged with behavior issues are given challenges. A lot of kids are hands-on and they want to do things, and move around. So giving them the opportunity, like GATE kids and AP kids get the opportunity to take college courses or to take community college courses or actual something in a trade field that they're interested in, to actually apply their knowledge instead of just sitting in a class learning some common core, that they're really not interested in. They can be given an opportunity to actually learn something that they can apply in life and move forward with it. So I don't believe that's offered at alternative schools. It's just a place to house them until they can get a GED or get a diploma and test out or getting, adding up credits and stuff. It's like, what's the purpose of accumulating all these credits if you're not going to apply them? You can really give these children a challenge and really address their needs, and give them something to do with their time, because they really don't need to spend 4 years in high school if they're not interested in it. They can actually, go do what they're interested in and make something of themselves and learn some real skills that they can apply. So alternative schools is funded. It's just another way of funding, spending money on something else that's not working. I don't see the purpose of it.
Wonderful. And I totally agree with each of you on that. But that's why we will win, and that's why we'll have these conversations, and that's why things that we can have informed us where we can approach. Me personally, it's like the entire public school system is just at this point damaged, and but we have great educators who who are there with the children, and so much is being taken away from them now to where it's like you have nationally an agenda that's been implemented into the schools, and everybody's following the same format, and teachers are getting in trouble when they go outside the lines. At one point in time, they were a lot of teachers, and some that I know, and even within my family, were very personal with students and were able to get closer to students, visit parents' house and things like that. And I know a lot of that they have stopped them from doing in Chicago, even teaching the way that they want to teach, bringing in their own tools and things into the classroom to help, as you said, sister, children are bored. So many teachers try to keep something and keep it going, but now are being kind of repressed. Well, you guys, I want to thank each of you for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation, and I with the compliance of everyone, I would love to recreate something more around the alternative schools, breaking education, and a few other things in regards to school push out beyond suspensions, just all aspects and dynamics, and would love to invite each of you back to join in on that conversation, and maybe a couple more going forward, because I really think the dynamics here with each of you on this panel, it provided, a broad perspective of what I'm saying, just views and things. So that just made me so happy. Yes, indeed. So and I love it, and I thank you, man, you guys so much, and all of you who aren't strangers to me. So that's the great thing about it too. So again, it was like putting this panel together and like, okay, you know, to do this, and even asking the question, Lucas, of transformative justice, who wanted to speak on it, of course, already knew it would be yourself, Anthony, and that was just great, and I appreciate it. But one thing I definitely want before we leave, because I really do think it's important that we do understand transformative justice as we tie many things into this struggle for liberation. And so I just want Lucas, if you could kind of point toward a link or something ones can Google to check out the periodicals in the Transformative Justice Journal, and where ones can read up on transformative justice. real quick, if you could.
There, just look up transformative justice journal.org. And if you're interested in submitting or even like being on the editorial board, that's fantastic. I also co-chair the abolitionist or transformative justice and abolitionist criminology conference every year. So if you have anything, especially the topics we've been talking about today, if you're interested of talking about it, it's an online conference, so you can come in, wherever in the world and have these awesome discussions and bring thoughts and perceptions to awesome folks. Just let me know or let Daphne know and everything, and we'll help you out and everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That will be great. Malukas, Fundisha for the show ill, and Christian fell off because I know she wasn't working. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much, and we really do want to. And hey, we're gonna look into that, Lucas, for the conference as well. So thanks everyone for watching and joining us. And man, I can only say so many times how much I appreciate you guys. Did anyone have any closing words before we go?
Again, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending and offering their perspectives and offering, value to this conversation that is very valuable. And I just want to also thank you, Queen Daphne, for creating this space for us during this very, very important week, National Week of Action Against School Pushouts. Thank you all for all of the work that you're doing in this particular field of endeavor.
Thank you too. Thank you, Daphne, for putting us together and bringing us all together.
And thank you all for being here. And also, guys, please check out online savethekidsgroup.org. And you can find all the activities of Save the Kids in the different locations. And there's truly a location near you. We mean that literally. There is a location near you. So please check out savethekidsgroup.org for the different activities, publications, Voices Behind the Walls, prison writings behind the walls. So many things that can be supported. The youth writings behind the wall, just so many things. Man, hip hop activism, lowriders, just so much. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for coming in. You will be hearing from me in our upcoming panel. Give me a month. I'll be right back at y'all. Peace and love, family.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And everyone else for watching. Free them all.
Thank you all. Free them all.
You. Stay dangerous.
Free them all.
Peace.
Already.